Papers tend to see this as a victory for those pro-democracy protests. Let's take a look at the front page of the Wall Street Journal today. It says that the defiant Hong Kong protesters win talks with senior executives. The Independent as well talks about Beijing blinking first. But it's a very different story in the papers in mainland China. There's been a media blackout, for instance, in China Daily over the past 2 days. There hasn't been a single article on those protests. And let's take a look at the front page of China Daily. For the very first time, it mentions those protests. It says the Hong Kong government urges an end to the protests, but it's a very factual article that really focuses on the perspective of the authorities in Hong Kong and not on the protesters.
Let's check out the New York Times because it's focusing on some Hong Kong residents who want the protests to stop.
That's right. The New York Times says that the passion and youth of the pro-democracy demonstrators has really captured people's imagination around the world. But as the shutdown drags on with no obvious political solution in sight, some Hong Kong residents are voicing skepticism over the demonstrators' goals and strategy, and especially there's a lot of anxiety in Hong Kong over emerging divisions in society, including within families. And to quote one businessman, he says the polarization is very acute and it will take more than a decade to heal. And this article says that many people, especially within the business community, are really concerned about the financial loss that's going to be brought on by these protests. And I pulled out a cartoon from the South China Morning Post, so a paper in Hong Kong that focuses on this as well. You can see two fat cats talking here, one saying, "Are you considering relocating your business?" And the other cat is saying, "You must be joking, where else am I going to shift this many umbrellas?"
All right, another big topic in the press today is, of course, the Ebola virus.
That's right. Now, there are, of course, those reports that freelance cameraman from NBC News in Liberia has tested positive with Ebola. I thought that in the light of that, it'd be really interesting to take a look at this article in the Washington Post. This actually came out on October 1st, but it's interesting to take a look at it today. It says that it talks about reporting on Ebola. The first rule is you don't touch anybody. This is a piece by Lenny Bernstein. He said that in the 12 days he spent reporting in Liberia, I touched only 2 people, not counting what he calls the occasional Liberian handshake, which is a soft bump on covered elbows. But it's a very interesting article, and he says that everybody is taking precautions in Liberia, anybody who can, but you really can't be sure where this invisible virus is.
Absolutely, and this is important because a journalist was actually, he contracted Ebola.
Absolutely, and of course, there's a lot of attention in the States because of that first case in the States by that Liberian man. Let's take a look at Slate. They focus on the fact that this Liberian man is actually going to face prosecution when he returns to Liberia for allegedly lying on an airport screening questionnaire before departing to the U.S. Now, on that form, he answered no to the question about whether or not he had cared for an Ebola patient. But according to the New York Times, he actually accompanied a pregnant woman to the hospital while he was in Liberia, who later died of Ebola. Now, of course, there's fears in the U.S. media that Ebola could spread. Health officials say that they're very confident that a very straightforward strategy, you can read about it here in the New York Times, contact tracing. They're confident that this strategy can stop the Ebola outbreak in its tracks. So authorities are playing down the risk, but check out this article in the Dallas Morning News. It says that healthcare gaps increase vulnerability to Ebola. Texas, for instance, is one of just 13 states to have completed training in Ebola diagnosis and containment. So the Dallas Morning News says that means that 37 states are unprepared. So there's gaps between states, but especially gaps between individuals. This article points out that people don't have access to healthcare in the same way in the United States, and so the risk isn't the same for everybody.
Right, and the US is due to fly in a US journalist from Liberia. That being said, though, some papers in the West are saying that we should not be worried.
That's right. Charlie Cooper, he's the health correspondent for The Independent. He asks the question, should we be worried? His answer is yes, but not for us. There's been a disproportionate amount of media coverage for Western victims of Ebola. Meanwhile, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea are on the verge of collapse. You know, schools are closed, businesses are shut. These are the real consequences of Ebola. They're tragic. And so let's take a look at the front page of the Independent today. It's a real call for the world to wake up. The great Ebola catastrophe. When is the world going to wake up? And in its editorial, it calls on the world to wake up. The international response to the outbreak has been patchy so far, and the Independent says we owe it to Africa to do much more.
Absolutely. All right, Florence Villeminot, thank you very much for that. You're not a man.
Not today.
All right, and it's time now to take a look at the day's business news, and Stephen Carroll is here with me in the studio.